NHL YouTuber and noted Pittsburgh Penguin fan Alyssa Hope is back on the show. We are going to be reviewing the Jake Guentzel trade, talking about this Rangers-Penguins matchup, and making some predictions for the Stanley Cup playoffs.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ranger fans, general hockey fans, fans of Alyssa Hope's YouTube channel. I'm sure we got at least a few of you in here today as well. We are going to be talking about, as always, this matchup between the Rangers and Penguins. Typically, when Alyssa's on the show, those two teams are about to play each other, and today is no exception. Also want to mention today's episode of Locked on New York Rangers is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. And Alyssa, first of all, welcome back to the show. Always good to have you on here, talk a little bit of hockey. And I know we were talking just a minute ago before I hit record about the Jake Guentzel trade. And of course, he ends up heading to the Carolina Hurricanes. So they do trade him in division, just not to the Rangers. And, you know, going into the deadline, I saw the rumors the Rangers were interested and they might be making some progress. But I just never really thought it was going to happen that these two teams would strike that kind of a trade where, you know, a guy that's, you know, basically an all-star caliber player was going to head from the Penguins to the Rangers. But been dying to get, you know, your thoughts on this, just hear the perspective from a Penguins fan, just your thoughts on everything that went down with Guentzel. And did you ever think there was a chance that he could go to the Rangers?
So whenever the rumors started, I mean, honestly, it started like, I want to say almost as the season started. There were rumors already starting with Guentzel because he was going to be pretty much the biggest trade piece on the market. I think most people knew, obviously, where he's pending UFA status. So I already kind of had that in the back of my mind. Okay, like he possibly could be traded. Like I went through the steps of grief, right? There's the denial, and I had the denial for a little while, and I was like, oh, maybe not. And then as it went on and the rumors and everything, and people kept giving their insights, and I'm like, okay, it would make sense as far as like the team as well just kept going down and in the standings. And it was like, okay, like maybe, you know, Dubas is going to pull the trigger because he had learned, I think, from his mistakes in the past, and he was kind of taken into consideration in Toronto, you know, what went wrong. And, you know, he wasn't doing what he needed to do in the deadline. He was getting bigger pieces. And it's like, hey, let's maybe not do that for once. Let's maybe hold on to what we have and try to get a little more for the future. So I did have that on the back of my mind going into the deadline, like, hey, you know, Guentzel could very well be traded. It could happen. And so I mentally prepared myself. But as far as the Rangers, I didn't think logically that it would work. And I just thought, I mean, they have so many big stars on their team. I mean, you got to think, I mean, when Alexis Lafreniere came in, he couldn't even find space in the top six for a while. I mean, because that team was so loaded. And now he's still in the kid line, right? Is he still in the third?
No, they've got him now with Panarin and Trocheck, so
okay.
he's really taken off.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But for a long time, there was that issue because there was so much talent up there, and it's like, where would they put him? Like, how would this work? And where's the appeal, you know, as far as that's concerned? So I actually thought that Carolina would make sense because I think that Rod Brind'Amour and company have learned over time. They've always needed that one goal or that other, you know, extra goal in the playoffs. And it's like, hey, we can get that score that can elevate our team in the playoffs and get us that goal possibly so we can finally advance and maybe get to a Stanley Cup final. So, yeah, that's what went through my mind all through the deadline and the process. Yeah.
Yeah, the Canes, they definitely feel like one of those teams that could probably use a little bit more scoring punch, you know, come playoff time. And obviously he's somebody that can provide that. And it actually kind of reminds me of like a few years ago. I mean, I guess it's more like 4 years ago at this point. But, you know, Kreider was having a really nice season for the Rangers. They weren't ready to contend yet. And the trade deadline's rolling around. He's in the last year of his deal. And it's like, all right, they either got to extend him at the 0 hour or trade him. Because you can't afford to lose him for nothing. And of course, they extended him. I'm very happy that they did. But I mean, was there any hope for you? I mean, I know the Penguins are kind of tight against the cap. Could an extension have happened? Because wasn't that long ago, you know, people were talking about him maybe as the next captain after Crosby. So any thoughts on that?
I told my friend, actually, that's also a Penguins fan, shout out to John. I actually told him, I'm like, you know what, because we had that conversation, who's going to be the next captain? And I'm like, I think it would be Jake Guentzel. It just makes sense. He's like, no, Brian Rust, big Brian Rust fan. So we actually did have that conversation. I'm like, I could see it. But I don't know. I was really heartbroken seeing Guentzel go, and it was really hard for me just as a fan. Because I did think, hey, there is that small possibility that he could be re-signed. But then again, I thought, whenever the Penguins went out on that West Coast trip, and they lost a lot of games, that I think was when Dubas was like, okay, like we've got to do it. We've got to pull the trigger. And it was interesting in that perspective for him because he shared, this was the first big real piece that I ever moved. You got to think about it. In his situation, he was just acquire. Let's give away picks. And so, or get picks. I'm sorry, get picks and give away picks. But yeah, so I think that was interesting, kind of seeing him having to change sides, if you will.
Yeah, it's kind of uncharted territory for him. And I'm actually going to ask you about Dubas a little bit later because obviously, a little bit of a tricky situation there with the Penguins because, we might as well just talk about it now, honestly. So he comes in, and I feel like, from Penguin fans, he's kind of gotten mixed reviews so far, but it is a tricky spot because, you extend Malkin and Letang, so you kind of have to keep going for it before these guys ultimately hang them up. But then again, you have to have at least some, eye on the future in one way or another. So, how do you think he's done so far? It's a tight, difficult balancing act, but how do you think he's done overall, beyond just the Guentzel trade?
I think, if we're being honest, he came into a mess. He came into an outright mess left by Ron Hextall. And I got to say, I think Hextall, maybe his heart was in the right place. Like Pens fans, we want to secretly joke, he was helping the Flyers out the whole time, under the table.
Guys, yeah.
But yeah, he came into an outright mess. And I think that it has been the theme. Year in and year out. And to me, as a fan, like I've kind of gotten sick of it. Like, yes, I want another cup. That would be great. But it's like, okay, are we, just head in the clouds, living out a fantasy and are we not prepping and doing what we need to do, for the future? So Dubas coming in, I think he got a lot of bad contracts off the books when he did get Erik Karlsson. I will say that. I really think that we got rid of a lot of players that weren't really helping us in the long run, and just bad contracts. But with the Erik Karlsson piece, I thought initially that it would be good. But whenever the season started and I saw the dreadful power play, it was hard to watch, painful, if you will, to watch. So I'm thinking to myself, Dubas, I think he was trying legitimately to go with the vision, I think, of the big three, Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. And I think that that's what they wanted. They wanted the push. And yes, I think Crosby's still playing out of his mind. It's amazing watching his longevity, having one of the best seasons of his career. And I think in a very long time. Obviously not putting up the 120 points, but in a very long time. So it's sad to see how it's all played out. But I do think that Dubas was trying to do his best. With coming into what he came into and to keep that same vision. Now, has it worked out? No. But I think he was trying to kind of go with that narrative maybe that was already there that the veterans had. And it's going to really blow up eventually. I think it already kind of has for Pittsburgh. It's going to, because, you go back to Jim Rutherford even, where he was dealing so many picks and acquiring so many players for so long. And it's like, okay, like we've been so depleted with the prospect pool for a very long time. And I will say that I'm glad that Dubas did hold on to that first rounder, because how long has it been since we've had one? I think it's been a long time. Like actually,
Yeah.
like, because I think this one's top 10 protected. So it's been a very long time. Years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, you guys are always, reloading and dealing
Yeah.
away those draft picks and bringing in players that can help you and occasionally winning Stanley Cups, much to the chagrin of Ranger fans. All right, just wanted to take a quick minute to give everybody a quick programming note. You are currently listening to part 1 of what turned out to be a 2-part episode with Alyssa Hope. It is Monday morning as I'm recording this. So what we're going to do in our next episode, Tuesday's episode, we're going to talk about whatever happens between the Rangers and the Penguins a little bit later here tonight on Monday night. And then on Wednesday, we'll have the second part of our 2-part conversation with Alyssa Hope. Definitely looking forward to all that. And of course, we also would like to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel is making it even more exciting to get in on the action. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet the tourney, MLB, NBA, NHL, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn on the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I did have one more Jake Guentzel question here, because obviously, they strike that deal with the Canes. I mean, was that a good return, a so-so return, a not good enough return that they got from the Canes? Obviously, you get Michael Bunting, who, by the way, when you guys trade for Michael Bunting, I kind of just groaned, because it's like, I know what a pain that guy is to go up against. And of course, now he's on the Penguins, and it's like, oh boy, can't wait to watch this guy for the next few years, try to drive the Rangers nuts. But so he's there, and obviously some prospects, a couple of draft picks as well. Did you think it was enough for Jake Guentzel? I mean, they are only getting him for half a season, but it's Jake Guentzel. I mean, you expect a pretty good return.
So I will say that I was excited about the prospect of Bunting, getting to see him, bring that edge to his game that he has. And I'm right there with you. Bunting, obviously before he put on a Penguins jersey, was probably my top 10 of most despised players, not because I don't like him as a person, but more of the on ice stuff. Like you said, he's a pain to play against. And so he almost reminds me, and I've been telling people, of that sort of Patrick Hornquist type of player, the one that's willing to go and take the punishment in front of the net, and willing to do what it takes net front to get that goal. And it may not be sexy, but it's going to be hard work that gets that goal in. And I think he fills a void that we've had for a long time. But as far as the return, I thought it was second rounder, and then we got a lot of prospects. But yeah. I think it's a little too soon to really know for sure, because, and I agree with what I've heard from a lot of different insiders and different takes, that yes, I think it's too soon to quite really gauge it to a T. But I will say that, considering, I mean, the thing is, I think that he was already at that point where he knew he had to move, and I think it was going to happen regardless. And I think that, I don't know, I think sometimes you get into that position where you're not able to get more. And I think that he probably got the best that he could have gotten in the, that scenario. So I think we'll see. But I'm happy with Bunting. I really am, because we wanted a player that could be inserted into the lineup into the top 6. That's what we wanted as part of the return. And obviously the prospects, that was big for Dubas. So.
Yeah, and you need a player like that has like kind of that edge and willing to do some of the dirty work and maybe even play some mind games with the opponents, and certainly he fits that description as well. So, we didn't get the blockbuster trade between the Rangers and Penguins that some people were looking for, but did strike a minor deal. Of course, the Rangers sending a 4th rounder to Pittsburgh for Chad Ruhwedel. And I remember after it happened, I was messaging you, and I messaged the guys from Locked On Penguins, so shout out to them if they happen to be watching this. But all three of you gave him like a really nice review, and just your thoughts on Ruhwedel and the way he played with Pittsburgh, while he was there. Because he's actually gotten into a few games here for the Rangers. A couple of injuries have piled up, and, he was back out of the lineup for the last one. But overall, I think he's played well, and a physical defenseman as well.
I think Ruhwedel's role, I think a lot of times those kind of defensemen are kind of more maybe behind the scenes. He's more of like a shutdown type. He's not going to be maybe scoring the flashy goals, but when I saw him play live, I really got to see his game kind of behind the scenes and, breaking up plays, taking pucks away in the defensive zone. And so I agree. He's very physical. And I was a little sad to see him go. Not as sad as Guentzel, but I was just like, oh no. Like, it's not the player you want to see go. And even though he's not, in the, top pairing, it's still, I was thinking, man, I was like, oh, there's one of those warriors, that's willing to do what it takes. He's going. Oh no. So, definitely a great player, and I hope y'all take care of him.
I think we will. He's like 8th on the depth chart right now, but like I said, the injuries piled up to the defenseman, and in a way, I feel like it's almost a blessing in disguise because two of the guys that were out were Lindgren and Trouba, and of course, they play such a physical style. I'm thinking like maybe it's good because they can come back for the playoffs like fresh and ready to go, and for Ruhwedel, at least he gets into a few games, gets to know his teammates, gets to like feel out the system a little bit. And if they have to go to him in the playoffs, hopefully he'll be ready for it. Just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Sleeper. We are coming down the home stretch of the NHL regular season, and the Rangers have been on top of the Metro basically from coast to coast. But regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our #1 choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Panarin or Trocheck or Lafreniere or Igor will record more or less in their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8-player stats. You heard me, Ranger fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you will get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Did want to also ask you about Mike Sullivan because, again, I don't watch every Penguins game, but you go on social media and you see every possible opinion you can possibly think of. One extreme is, oh, he's done. They've tuned him out, that they're not playing for him anymore. And the other extreme is like, well, Ron Hextall messed up this team and nobody can win with this roster. So, again, your thoughts on Mike Sullivan. Like, should he still be the guy? And do you think they'll go with him for as long as the Crosby era, continues there, however many more years that might be?
Say that whenever Mike Sullivan came in, I thought he brought the perfect voice that the room needed. And I've always enjoyed and found his positivity refreshing. Because you do have those more of the cynical coaches, maybe like the John Tortorellas and those types that maybe aren't bringing that uplifting message all of the time. So I've always enjoyed, that he's always looking up. And even when, the team's down in the dumps like it has been, I don't think he's ever just, throwing guys under the bus in the media. And I like that about him. But as far as, do I think that he's more not as welcome? I think that, yes, the team's been in a tough spot. I think that he's the coach that obviously, helped guide the Penguins to 2 cups. So you have to respect him in that regard. But I have wondered about it. I've been a little torn because, like I said, I like what he brings as far as the message, and he's he's been the team's coach for so long, but I have wondered if maybe a different voice would be what the Penguins need. But at the same time, it's like, well, I mean, we kind of knew this was coming regardless of who the coach was. We knew that they were probably not going to keep going at the same pace. And I think that we got into denial a little bit with Erik Karlsson. But also, I want to say that Penguins fans, a big narrative I've seen, and I actually agree with them, Todd Reirden. I think if anyone's going to go first, I would say Todd Reirden, because the power play has been awful.
Fair enough. So maybe some retooling around Sullivan, and you can keep him there, but we'll see how that goes. You know what? While we're talking about that, the Penguins should not be a team that like struggles that badly on the power play. I know they don't have the depth that some other teams do, so maybe the second power play unit you would expect to not be great, but with the weapons that they have, and Letang and Karlsson and Malkin, Crosby, like they should. Is it just coaching? Is it just the scheme in your estimation, as far as just why it hasn't clicked this year?
I think honestly, and I don't know if a lot of people have said this, but I think it could be partially the psychology of it, because it's like, you have those big guns and it's like, well, we're so loaded, like we've got to be so good and we've got to get the perfect sort of, passes, and we've got to get it looking so good on the power play. And it's like, it seems like it's been a lot of passing, at least from the games that I've watched where they have been on the power play. It's a lot of passing. It's a lot of looking. There hasn't been, sometimes you go and you score the goal. There's not a lot of, making it look perfect. But I think too, having two similar players in Letang and Karlsson, it's like, I think they have a similar role on the power play. And I think that that's been kind of hard to make it work when you have two players that are so similar on the power play, wanting to play maybe the same role. So yeah, I think it's been, I would say coaching, but it's also been kind of that dynamic. It's different, and it's been hard for them to figure out. And I don't know. I think with Bunting, I think putting him in front of the net is obviously a good option. So go with that. But as far as like, I don't know, I feel like Letang was running it really well before Karlsson came. And it's no disrespect to Karlsson, but I think he was just running it really well before.
All right, so a big thanks to Alyssa Hope for joining the podcast here once again. Believe this is her third appearance on Locked On New York Rangers, and a huge thanks to you guys as well for always tuning in to Locked On New York Ranger podcast, your team every day. I'm going to go ahead and leave a couple of links to some of the videos that Alyssa has posted on her YouTube channel. We'll certainly leave one for a recent video that she did on Matt Rempe. And then also she's got this recurring series on her YouTube channel that is my personal favorite, the Jerk Moment series, where, it's basically just what it sounds like. She highlights one player or another player of them acting like jerks on the ice. So I'll find one of those and leave a link for that for you guys as well. And definitely give her channel a subscribe if you get a quick minute. But that will do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, at @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that is at @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.